You're listening to Kate Palmer from SparkleTart.com. Today I'm going to show you how to make a layered journal page. So what I've done is I've drawn this doodled image just while I was watching telly with my Copic multi-liners, a 0.3 and a 0.5 in size, just the blacks, and I've done the original doodling. Then I've used my Copic markers, and I'll list the colours just underneath here to colour in the page. Now because, well, I suppose honestly, because I've done this while I'm watching telly, it's not exactly my best doodles. It's not something I was putting a lot of thought into, and that's kind of the whole process. Once I finish the doodle, I've taken a photograph of it so I can use it again later. And that fabulous idea came from Jane Davenport. This is a great way to reuse your own artwork, or even to use things that didn't quite turn out the way you had hoped they might. Now, if you're not a doodler or don't have any of your own art that you'd like to use, you're always welcome to use an image from a magazine. You could just collage some random coloured pieces onto your page. There are lots of ways that you can start this off. Here you can see my finished piece, or one of the sides of it, and this is what I'm going to show you how to do. So give this a go, because with just a few simple steps you can create a really high impact journal page. Start by adhering your colour copied piece of art using Liquitex matte gel onto your page in your art journal. Now I'm just going to lay down a base of the matte medium gel, and then I'm going to lay my colour copied piece of art on top of it, and then I'm just going to cover it with another layer of the matte medium gel just to give it a little bit of strength and a little bit of tooth, so that the layers of paint I'll add afterwards have got something to stick to and won't scrape off. Let this dry before moving on to the next step. Because this is a copy and not the original piece of artwork, it's looking a little washed out. So I'm adding some Vavoom red, and this is one of the Silk's acrylic paints. And all this is going to do is add a layer of burgundy paint with a little bit of shimmer, although you won't really see that very much in the finished piece. If you don't have the Silk's acrylic glaze, you can mix some acrylic paint, glossy or matte, with sparkles, without. It doesn't really matter. It was just to help give a little bit more life to my background piece. You can see how adding that darker colour has made all of the other colours look more vibrant, and that's the effect I was going for. No, I haven't gone over anything else, just that darker colour, and it has that effect on the rest of the colours around it. Makes them pop. And because it's on the back of a finished page, I'm being really careful about where the glue and where the colours go. So I've adhered my cutout photocopy to my page, and what I've done is I've left it overhanging just a little so that it protects the page underneath, and I'll just trim that off when I get to the end. I have some assorted stencils. It doesn't really matter which ones you'd like to use because they're going to be covered quite a lot, so just grab whatever you have. It doesn't have to be these. I'm using a mini punchinella, the mini flower garden, and the mini flower piecing, and these are all from Crafters Workshop. All I'm really going to do is add a little bit of this to break up that background pattern. So I'm going to start with the red, and I'm going to use the acrylic paint dabber in Watermelon. Now you can see I'm not trying to cover my background, I'm just trying to break up that patterning a little bit. And I'm going to add 3 different colours of the dabbers over the top here to help achieve that. Now I've got some paint on here, and usually what I do is put it in another page, but because I'm trying to break this up, I'm just going to very carefully add it just here. Whoops, and this is one of the hazards of my craft room. I'm about to have a very fluffy little kitten jump down right across my work. So, guess how often I've had painty feet. Not me personally, this would be my cat Jade. Now if you've got any paint left over, you can always just sort of press the stencil wherever you might like to use it. Don't waste anything that way. Now it's really important to let this dry between coats so that your colours of paint don't end up muddy. I'm not very patient, so I just do this with my heat gun. Now of course the paint doesn't need to be super dry, it just needs to be touch dry. Next I'm going to add the mini flower garden, and I'm going to use one of the Jenny Bolan Ranger dabbers in Malted Milk. Now it's interesting, what I'm seeing here is that the acrylic paint is reactivating the silks. I'm getting this line of purple through here, but you know, that doesn't really matter because this is not my final piece, and I actually kind of like it. It just adds another layer of difference. So carefully peel that off, and you can see how that's really starting to break up those colours. Now of course, drying between each layer of paint. And the last stencil, I'm going to use the mini Punchinella, and I'm going to add the brown sugar in the Jenny Bolan from Ranger. And this one I'm just going to add wherever there is not some previous work. And now this is all just adding a bit of interest and variation, a little bit of texture, and I think I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Dry this with the heat gun before the next step. For the next step, I'm going to add some golden iridescent bright gold, and it's in the fluid acrylic. I've got this wonderful text stamp I'm going to use. Now, the easiest way to stamp with paint is to put a little bit on some scrap paper, and I like to use one of these little foam sponges. Now this one happens to be created to use with pen pastels, but I have a few of these, so there's no reason not to use it. So you just get a little smear on the sponge and tap it over the stamp. Now it's never going to be as crisp and as clean as ink, but if you want to stamp with paint, this is an easy way to do it. Aha, now I've just come across my next problem. When you get these spirals, you're going to have to take the stamp off the backing and just use your fingers, because the plastic kind of makes contact with spirals and means you can't stamp. So that's done there. Now it's really incredibly important that you go and wash this off your stamp straight away, otherwise your stamp might not work again properly. This is the same zinnia stamp I've used on the other side, and I'm just going to keep it on the block to ink it up, and I'm using the carbon black. Again, it's the fluid acrylic from Golden. I'm just going to follow the same process. Whoop, okay, looks like I'm using it like that. Now with this you need a nice thick layer, because you really need to see the pattern. Now the trick here is to make sure you lift it up without wiggling it. Now the majority of this I've got a really good connection, and you can see all of the bits. The middle, not that great, but we can fix that. Now I'm just going to quite roughly tear a rounded shape just to protect this one here. I'm just going to quickly stamp another one over there. Just so it looks like there's a flower behind, fill in some of that space. The next step in this process is to paint around those stamped images. That's what makes them pop. So I'm using the same paint as I used to stamp with. That way it looks sort of like it's all part of the one thing. And you can't really tell it's a stamped image quite so much. So I'm using the carbon black, and just very carefully work your way around the outside of the stamped flower and paint so that the entire background is covered. Now because this is a 2-page spread, I'm painting very carefully between the spiral bindings, just so that the 2 pages, when they're open, look a bit more coherent. Just work slowly, you don't have to go quickly here, and of course make sure that your paint is dry before you move on to the next step. Alright, so when I look at the pages together, this one for me just doesn't have enough red to match the other side. So I'm just going to use a quick stencil and stencil over a few of the bits and pieces here. I'm just using watermelon dabber again and adding a bit more red into some of those flowers. Now it doesn't matter that I've already stamped the image on top or painted it in. I'll just go around the edges with a little bit more black paint for any areas where I've snuck over. That extra flower is just not working for me, so I'm going to use the same black paint to just paint the flower over, and what I'll do is I'll leave the outline that suggests perhaps a stem and a leaf, just so it matches the other page a bit more. It's just a bit got too many colours going on, the flowers just aren't popping for me. Next I'm going to stamp in Versamark ink and use the sticky embossing powder from Ranger to add some gold foil to the centre of the flower. You might choose to skip this. I'm just using the little plastic acetate to line up where the flower is. And it just butts up against this T-square. Apply a little Versamark ink to the centre of the flower. Line this up. Stamp on top of my image. Press down firmly. Add the embossing powder. Tip off the excess. Give it a little tap. Use a brush just to brush the excess powder off. The excess goes back into the jar. Heat until it turns clear. Once it's clear and shiny, place the foil on the top. You can either carefully pat it down with your fingers, just making sure you don't get too close to the heat or you don't get burnt. I like using a little stenciling brush, just sort of saves the fingers. I find you get a better result too, it gets into all those little nooks and crannies. And then once it's cool to the touch, doesn't have to be cold, just cool, lift it off. And you've then got that beautiful gold design. Now as you can see, it's still quite indistinct, so we have the flowers but they don't really leap out at you, and that's what the white doodling adds. Just that addition of the white really makes these designs pop. So as you can see at the moment, it really doesn't look all that special. It's pretty, but it's not got that wow factor. When you add the white, it really makes the designs leap. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to add all of the white doodling, or the white outlining, so that my pages match. At this stage it's extremely important to make sure that the paint is dry, or else you can ruin your white gel pens. So I'm just going to leave this overnight, wait for it to dry, and then I'll come back and do the rest. This last step just uses a Molotow or Molotow paint marker, and this is one of the extra fine tips. Now this is the time when you get to either add or embellish. You can also make elements look larger than they actually were by making the outline slightly bigger, or smaller by drawing within the shape itself. You can also choose to highlight areas. So there was a little bit of paint missing here, I've just outlined it with a small circle. And you just work your way around the design, outlining the elements in white, and it's the white that really makes this pop. Until you add the white, it looks kind of the technical term. Now even with just the addition of the first layer, you can really see how that's really bringing the design out. So I'm going to go and do this second part of the flower, and then I'm going to embellish the centre of the gold with white, just so that you can really see the design. I'm going to pick the design out. Now I really just want to highlight the difference that white pen makes. This is it without it, that's it with it. You've got to admit it's almost like a different page. It really accentuates the colours and it separates the background from the flowers. I'd love to see what you do with this idea, so don't forget you can come and share your art on Facebook over on the Sparkle Tart page. Thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye.